Most people think collapse happens in an instant, like the ground suddenly vanishes beneath your feet, or the sky falls without warning. But that's not how it works. Collapse is quiet. It's subtle. It begins like a hairline crack on the inside of a dam. You don't see it. You don't feel it. But every moment, with every unnoticed pressure, it grows, until one day it becomes visible, and by then, it's already too late. That's what today's warning is really about. It's not about fear. It's not even about disaster. It's about the moments we ignore. The moments we tell ourselves, it's nothing. One morning missed, one workout skipped, one promise broken, one truth avoided. These things never feel dangerous when they happen. That's the trap. They feel normal. They feel justified. You're tired. You're busy. You'll do it tomorrow. But a person doesn't collapse when they fall. They collapse in the buildup, in the neglect, the laziness, the inner decay that went unseen. When a tree falls in the forest, people say it just snapped. What they don't see is that for years, its roots were rotting. It stood tall, but it was hollow inside. That's what's happening to too many people right now. They look composed, but something inside them is breaking, and they don't even hear it. We're living in a time where appearances deceive even the self. You look around and compare yourself to others, and because you're functioning, eating, walking, working, you assume everything is fine. But deep down, you feel the truth. You feel the dullness in your spirit, the heaviness in your chest, the restlessness when you lie awake at night. You feel that something's off. But instead of stopping and facing it, you distract yourself. You scroll, you blame the world, you numb the signal, and so the crack grows wider. Every crack you ignore turns into a collapse you cannot control. One bad habit you entertain becomes a lifestyle. One lie you repeat becomes your reality. One area of life you neglect infects all others. This is how the downfall begins, not with noise, but with silence, not with failure, but with comfort. It begins when you choose ease over effort, escape over discipline, illusion over truth. That's why this moment matters more than ever. Because what you choose today determines if you'll face the collapse or walk right into it. And you already know which side you're leaning toward. You don't need someone to tell you. You've felt the weight of your own compromise. You've seen the signs, the procrastination, the fatigue, the emotional outbursts, the lack of clarity. These aren't random, they're symptoms, and symptoms ignored become sickness. Not of the body, but of the spirit, a kind of spiritual paralysis where you're alive but not living, awake but not present, moving but not progressing. That's the modern collapse, when the mind gives up before the body ever does. When you're surrounded by everything, yet feel empty inside, and the scariest part is that it looks normal on the outside. That's why no one sees it coming. But here's the truth, you always get a warning before the collapse. Always. A whisper, not a scream. A nudge, not a shove. But we're trained to ignore the soft voice within, because it doesn't come with flashing lights. And so we delay. We convince ourselves that we're still in control. But the longer you delay, the more control you lose. And eventually, life no longer asks for your permission. It breaks down what you refuse to rebuild. So if you're hearing this now, and something in you is stirring, something uncomfortable, something undeniable, that's the signal. That's the whisper. That's the quiet voice trying to reach you before everything falls apart. Because after that, there is no discussion, no negotiation. Collapse doesn't ask for your opinion, it arrives. And it consumes whatever was left standing. The real question is, will you hear the warning in time? Or will you keep living like there's always another chance? Because there isn't. If there's one truth people don't want to hear, it's this: discipline is not optional. Not if you want to stay standing. Not if you want to survive what's coming. Discipline is the only structure strong enough to hold your life together when everything else is shaking. Without it, you may look composed, you may even look successful, but inside, you're breaking apart piece by piece. And the worst part, You won't even notice until the collapse is already happening. We've built a culture that worships comfort. Everything is fast, easy, convenient. Push a button, get what you want. But that same comfort is what's weakening you. Because with comfort, you forget how to struggle, you forget how to push, how to persist, how to command your own mind. And slowly, you start handing over power to your moods, to your impulses, to your excuses. You stop leading yourself, and you start being led by whatever feels good in the moment. That's not freedom. That's slavery disguised as choice. Discipline is what frees you from that trap. Not because it makes life easier, but because it gives you strength where others break. It gives you structure in a world that's becoming more chaotic every day. It's the one thing you can rely on when everything else is uncertain. But most people won't build it because discipline is uncomfortable. It doesn't give you immediate pleasure. It doesn't care how you feel. It asks more of you, not less. And that's why it works. You can't have both a life built on ease and a mind built for battle. One cancels the other. If you train yourself to run from resistance, you will run from every challenge that matters. You'll collapse not because the world is too heavy, but because your foundation is too soft. This is what the collapse looks like in real time. Not an explosion, but a slow erosion of everything that once held you together. You stop doing the small things that keep you strong. You stop showing up when no one's watching. You stop demanding more from yourself when it's uncomfortable. And the moment you let those things go, your edge disappears. You start to drift, and at first it feels harmless. You tell yourself, it's just one day, just one slip. But every day you ignore discipline is a day you feed the collapse. And the collapse is patient. It doesn't rush. It waits for you to get soft. It waits for your defenses to drop. And when it comes, it doesn't knock. It kicks the door in. That's why discipline isn't a punishment. It's a shield. It's a weapon. It's a decision you make every morning to not let the world decide who you are. And the more you train it, the less permission you need. You don't need motivation. You don't need inspiration. You do what needs to be done, because that's who you've chosen to become. And the moment you live like that, collapse loses its grip on you. But let's be honest, it's hard. It's lonely. No one claps for discipline. No one praises you for getting up early, for staying focused, for saying no to what weakens you. In fact, the world will mock you for it. They'll call you rigid, obsessive, even cold. Let them. Because when their lives start falling apart, they'll look to the disciplined ones for stability. They always do. Because the ones who stay ready don't need to get ready. And the ones who live with structure don't panic when the world loses its own. So ask yourself right now, where are you being soft with yourself? Where are you letting things slide? Where are you waiting to feel ready instead of getting disciplined? Because that's the part of your life that's already starting to slip. And if you don't tighten it, the collapse will enter through that crack. It always does. Not out of cruelty, but out of cause and effect. You either command yourself, or something else will. The truth is brutal, but simply, if you don't impose order on yourself, life will impose chaos on you. Most people think they're falling apart because of what's happening outside of them. The job stress, the family problems, the economy, the noise of the world. But collapse rarely starts on the outside. It begins inside, in the mind, in the emotional world you carry silently. And what makes it dangerous is that emotional contamination is invisible until it's already poisoning everything. You can be doing everything right on the surface, eating healthy, exercising, meditating, working hard. But if your emotional world is full of chaos, none of it will hold. Because emotional energy spreads, and it doesn't need your permission. If you surround yourself with people full of fear, doubt, laziness, or bitterness, their energy will start to infect your own. And if your boundaries aren't solid, you'll wake up one day confused why you're angry, unmotivated, and disconnected, as if a fog entered your mind and you don't remember opening the door. But that's how it works. Not with a bang, but a slow bleed. One conversation here, one toxic influence there. One moment where you absorb someone else's drama, one day where you carry someone else's despair. Over time, you begin to echo the emotions of the people around you. Not because you're weak, but because you were never taught how to protect your space. And if you don't defend that space, it becomes occupied by everything and everyone around you. This is why it's not enough to work on your goals. You have to work on your energetic hygiene. Just like you wouldn't wear clothes soaked in poison, you can't afford to carry emotions that don't belong to you. But we do it all the time. We internalize other people's anger. We take on their sadness. We absorb their helplessness. And we don't even notice we've lost our own clarity, our own direction, our own truth. It happens subtly. You start to hesitate more. You stop trusting yourself. You second guess what you used to be sure about. You become reactive instead of steady. You get tired not from work, but from emotional overload. And that's when the collapse begins. When your energy no longer belongs to you, but is shaped by everything outside of you. So the question isn't just, how do I get stronger? The real question is, what am I allowing into my space? Because strength without clarity is dangerous. You can be strong and still be pulled in the wrong direction. You can be powerful and still collapse, simply because your energy wasn't your own anymore. And it only takes a few weak influences. People who don't sharpen you, environments that drain you, content that dulls your mind, to start that decline. People assume emotional collapse comes from some big traumatic event. Sometimes it does, but more often it's slow, a slow leak of energy, a constant exposure to weakness disguised as kindness, a daily intake of fear disguised as concern. You become what you tolerate. You reflect what you absorb. And unless you become intentional with who and what you allow in, the emotional collapse is inevitable. That's why protecting your emotional space isn't selfish. It's necessary. Because when your energy is clean, your mind is sharp. When your emotional world is in order, your decisions are clear. And when your internal state is strong, the outside world can shake, but it can't break you. But you can't fake this. You can't pretend to be calm when your spirit is flooded. You have to clean it. You have to clear the noise. You have to cut what weakens you and create distance from what drains you, not out of anger, but out of discipline. Every time you allow weak energy to stay close, you send a message to your system, this is acceptable, and your system adapts. It becomes less alert, less precise, less powerful, until one day, you don't even remember who you were before the contamination began. You forget how still your mind used to be, how certain you once felt, how alive your inner world used to sound. You can't afford that anymore. Not now. The collapse is not just personal, it's collective. You don't just fall with your own weight. You fall with the weight of everyone you've allowed to sit on your shoulders, and that fall is brutal. So if you feel heavy lately, unclear, or disconnected, maybe it's not because you're lost. Maybe it's because you're carrying what was never yours to begin with. Protect your energy like your life depends on it. Because it does. Every single day, whether you realize it or not, you're making a choice. You're either training or you're drifting. There is no neutral ground, no pause button on life, no space where you can stand still and expect to remain unchanged. You're either becoming sharper, stronger, and more disciplined, or you're slipping, slowly, into weakness and decay. And what makes it dangerous is that the slipping doesn't feel like movement at all. It feels like rest, like you're taking a break, like you've earned some ease. But ease has a cost, and that cost is paid in awareness, ability, and time you never get back. The truth is, drifting is seductive. It whispers, just today, just this once, you deserve it. And you listen, not because you're lazy, but because drifting feels peaceful compared to the weight of training. But here's the difference: training builds you. Drifting slowly dismantles you. And by the time you realize what's happening, by the time you see what you've lost, you're already deep into collapse. because you can't undo the time you spent drifting. You can only pay for it with delayed dreams, with forgotten strength, with a version of yourself that no longer exists. People think training only happens in the gym or during meditation or when you're reading books. But training is in the small decisions. Waking up early even when you're tired, saying no when it's easier to say yes, facing discomfort instead of hiding behind excuses. Training is about direction, not perfection. It's about showing your system every single day that you still have control, that you still care, that you're still awake. Because the moment you stop training, the moment you let things slide, your mind starts adapting to softness. And once softness becomes the default, collapse is just a matter of time. Drifting doesn't look dangerous because it's passive, but that's why it's so lethal. It lowers your standards in silence. It robs you of urgency. It convinces you that effort can wait, and it lies to you, telling you that maintaining where you are is enough. But the truth is, you can't maintain anything. You're either in motion, or you're being moved by something else. And when you're not training yourself, life will train you. Through pain, through setbacks, through loss. That's how it works. You either choose the suffering of discipline, or you receive the suffering of regret. There is no other option. Some people wake up and their first instinct is to move, to train, to face what's ahead and take ownership. Others wake up and they drift into distractions, into complaints, into routines that dull their mind. The difference isn't motivation, it's intent. The first group lives with clarity. The second group lives on autopilot. And that's the most dangerous state to be in. Not in chaos, but in comfort without direction, because you feel safe. But you're not. You're drifting straight toward collapse with a smile on your face. Ask yourself honestly, what did you train today? Not what did you do? Not what tasks did you complete? What part of your mind did you sharpen? What habit did you strengthen? What discomfort did you willingly face? If the answer is nothing, then you're drifting. And if that doesn't bother you, you're already halfway to losing the version of yourself that once had fire, purpose, and grit. Every single moment is a chance to pull yourself back, to turn the drift into direction. But that takes honesty. That takes breaking the lie that you're too busy, or that you'll get back to it soon. No, you get back to it now, because there is no later. Later is how people waste years. Later is how they build lives filled with regret. And later is how the collapse catches them off guard. Not because they weren't warned, but because they kept sleeping through the warning signs. If you still have breath, you still have a choice. And the choice is simple: drift into collapse or train into resilience. But only one path will hold when the pressure comes. Only one will keep you rooted when everything around you begins to shake. The other will leave you wondering when you lost yourself. And the answer will always be the moment you stop training. You're never standing still. You're either preparing or you're being prepared for defeat. There comes a point in life when the things you're holding on to are the very things dragging you down. And the longer you carry them, the more you convince yourself that they're harmless, that they're manageable, that you can keep them without consequence. But that's a lie. Everything you allow into your life has weight. And some things, some people, some habits, some choices, they don't just weigh you down, they bury you. Slowly, quietly, without force. Until you wake up one day, completely disconnected from who you once were. Not because you didn't have strength, but because you wasted it carrying what should have been cut long ago. Cutting things from your life doesn't mean you're cold. It means you've finally learned what the collapse costs. You've seen how much energy it takes to tolerate what you should have rejected. You've felt the exhaustion that comes not from action, but from internal friction. Doing things that go against your spirit, staying in places that drain you, holding on to relationships that make you small. That friction builds. It wears you down. Not in one day, but over weeks, months, years. And then suddenly you break, and it feels like it came out of nowhere. But it didn't. It came from every compromise you made in silence. People are afraid of being alone, of being misunderstood, of letting go of what's familiar, even when that familiarity is killing their momentum. So they stay, they tolerate, they carry, and then they wonder why they have no energy, no clarity, no fire. It's because your system is overloaded with what doesn't serve you, and no amount of rest, meditation, or motivation will fix that. You can't heal in the same space that's been poisoning you. You can't grow while still attached to what's shrinking you. There's a brutal truth people avoid sometimes. The collapse is not caused by one massive failure. It's caused by 1,000 small acceptances of things that weaken you. That person who always complains. That habit you know robs you of time. That environment that keeps you small. These are the things you think you can handle. But what they're actually doing is shaping you. And not in your image, but theirs. Every time you allow something to stay that you know should be gone, you trade your future for your comfort. And every time you tell yourself, it's not that bad, you're putting off a decision that will only get harder later. The sooner you cut what weakens you, the sooner you get your power back. But that power demands a price: discomfort, detachment, and most of all, truth. The truth about what's no longer aligned with your direction. You don't cut because you hate, you cut because you finally accepted that not everything can go where you're going. Growth is not addition. Growth is subtraction. It's about stripping away what is false, what is heavy, what is distracting. It's about making space for what is real, sharp, and alive. And that space can only be created when you let go. Not when it's easy, but when it's necessary. Yes, it's hard. It's hard to walk away. It's hard to delete the number. It's hard to end the cycle. But it's harder to wake up every day with your soul suffocating. It's harder to keep pretending that things are fine when your spirit knows the truth. You cannot lie to your energy. It will always reflect what's going on inside, no matter how much you try to perform on the outside. And when that disconnect grows, so does the damage. The collapse doesn't wait for you to get ready. It moves in when the weight becomes unsustainable. When your spirit can no longer hold the pressure of what you've allowed to remain. And that's when the fall begins. Not because you weren't strong enough to hold on, but because you weren't brave enough to let go. There is no gentleness in this part of the path. There is only clarity. And once you see clearly, you no longer have the luxury of indecision. You act, you cut, you clean the space. Because your future demands it, because your peace requires it, because your life depends on it. What you refuse to cut will eventually cut you. The most dangerous illusion people live under is the belief that time repeats itself, that they'll get another chance, that tomorrow will look like today, and next week will bring more options, more clarity, more strength. But time doesn't repeat, it evaporates. Every moment is a window that closes. Every second is a decision that seals itself the moment it's passed. And once it's gone, it never returns. People say things like, I'll start next month. I just need to get through this week. I'll focus when things calm down. But what they don't understand is that this is the very mindset that leads to collapse. Because time doesn't wait for your convenience. It doesn't bend to your schedule. It just moves, with or without you. And those who hesitate are always the first to fall. Not because they weren't capable, but because they assumed they had more time than they did. If you could zoom out and look at your life from above, you'd see the truth. Every delay has cost you more than you think. Every day spent waiting to feel ready has chipped away at your potential. Every promise you broke to yourself has pushed you further from the life you said you wanted. And yet, the mind is clever. It wraps those losses in justifications. It says, it wasn't the right time, or I'll try again later. But deep down, something in you knows, those were turning points. And you didn't turn. There is no mercy in wasted time. It doesn't give you refunds. It doesn't send you reminders. It doesn't care how valid your excuses were. Time is indifferent. It just keeps ticking. And when people finally wake up, it's not with motivation, it's with regret. That's what the final wake-up call really sounds like. Not a loud crash, but a quiet, aching realization that you missed it. That you were there, standing right at the edge of transformation, and you let it pass. This is why urgency matters. Not panic, but presence. Urgency is not rushing. It's understanding the weight of a moment. It's knowing that what you do today echoes louder than what you promise for tomorrow. And most people lose to time not because they're slow, but because they never decided. They danced with indecision. They waited for clarity. But clarity doesn't come to the hesitant. It comes to the committed. The 15th of July is just a symbol, a marker, a point to pause and ask, what have you been delaying? What fire have you let go cold? What version of yourself have you postponed for the illusion of someday? Because someday doesn't exist. There is only now. This breath, this step, this decision. And every single one of them either brings you closer to collapse or pulls you out of it. When you live like time is infinite, you tolerate things you should cut. You stay in places you should leave. You carry habits that are slowly breaking you because you assume you'll deal with them later. But the collapse doesn't come with a calendar reminder. It comes when the weight of delay becomes too heavy to hold. It comes when your system, your mind, your spirit can no longer absorb the consequences of your own inaction. That's when the cracks give way. That's when the mask falls off. And by then, it's not about fixing. It's about surviving. So don't wait for collapse to teach you what presence should have. Don't wait until the storm arrives to start building shelter. You are in the moment right now, where everything can still change, but only if you stop treating time like it owes you something. It doesn't. It never has. It only rewards those who move when it counts. And right now, it counts. Because time is not repeating, it's running out.